adapted in experience.
In the immense journey, if we come back to Nebraska again, he uses Nebraska over and over and over again, and that's why in one of my courses I like to try to use Eiseley, because I think this is such a wonderful resource to have someone from this state, to have as someone to also model one's readings after. And he, coming back to the Platte River, he talks of the chapter of the snout. And sunflower forests, where Nebraska has a great abundance of sunflowers. And he uses these as examples in terms of critical points in the evolution of life on this planet. He looks at the snout as as we look at some of that Nebraska and Kansas basically form the boundaries of the Cretaceous Sea, the late Cretaceous. And he talks about as the seas began to recede and we started having swamps and shallows, the fish creatures who would not be able to compete successfully in the oceans, yet gasping for life, using the oxygen as their own waters became oxygen depleted, the slow snout to be able to absorb oxygen in a very painful way, having to survive and struggle by crawling on its fins, and that these fins would eventually become the webbed feet of the first amphibians. That first great pioneer that had to be able to crawl itself and struggle to the next pond or to go downstream. And again, he uses Nebraska's, the ponds, the slowly drying little puddles to describe history of 300, 400 million years ago.
And also he makes use of the metaphors of these walking catfish in Texas, who actually do get out on land and explore around, but then they go back to their native element, which is the water. And you have these in Australia too, incidentally. You get up in certain sections of northern Australia, and you see fish up in the trees. It's kind of spooky.
Yeah, lest we become too arrogant. Eiseley, this occurred 300 million years ago, unless we become too smug in what has evolved to become with us as one of the present products, intermediate products, you might say. He said the process is ongoing today. You have fish out of water, literally, in different parts of the world. And they do it not exactly, perhaps, as the first amphibians that came. Some are able to bring in air through their stomachs. Some are able to bring it in through their gills without the development of the lung system. So what he's saying is this great natural force, this nature, has other ways of going about seeing the rise of new species.
Our native element is water, and he reminds us that we're about 75% water anyway. And as Henry David Thoreau said, the pickerel that he saw there in Walden Pond was just another really form of water, a life entity, but water in another form. And so why do these creatures go back to their native habitat? Well, why don't you want to get out of the bathtub? Why is it that the longer you sit there in that hot bath, the longer you want to stay? Why is it that when you're in the shower, the longer that soothing spray comes down and envelops your body, the more you want to stay in it? Well, it just goes back to our aboriginal impulses. We didn't want to leave that natural continuum of water which surrounded us. And we got out in the air. That's a shock. And why do these fish go back to the water instead of staying out? I mean, they know how to live. Why don't they stay with us, huh? They're out here in the air. They got it made. Leave the water behind and be like us. They like the water better. They go back. Why did the whale? Why did the whale? He had it made. Look at those. Look at the body of that whale. You go to the Smithsonian. You look under those fins and you see joints. You see the equivalent of knee joints. Those aren't just plain old fish fins. What does that say about the whale? Maybe, was there a time when he crawled up on the shore? Maybe he propelled himself. Maybe he was a mighty battleship on this earth. Maybe he would have been the most formidable creature on this earth. But what happened? Well, he might have said the wolves nipped at his knees and he got tired of it and wanted to go back to the sea because that's where his natural habitat was. So the whale went back to the sea. But what is he? He's still got his memories. He's got those lungs. And once an hour, he's got to come up because he can't forget us. I mean, he liked it up here. A part of him did. And he comes up once an hour and goes.
No gills.
He takes in that oxygen, his lungs. You know, his lungs like it. So not everybody chose to stay up here in the air as we did.
Right.
There was an entity of life that got a whiff of this air and said, that is good stuff. I'm going to stay with it. I'm going to hang around and see what I can do here. And that, of course, I'm embroidering a little bit on what Eiseley says here in The Immense Journey, but that essentially is why we're here. We didn't decide. Something in us said, don't go back to the water. You can do better up here in the air. And we developed the equipment, we developed the lungs, we developed the body, we developed the system to enable us to not just survive, but hopefully, some people think, prevail.
Yeah, Eiseley says that the door to the past is a strange door. It swings open and things pass through it. But they passed in one direction only. No man can return across that threshold, though he can look down still and see the green light waver in the water weeds. And talking about the whales, and again, back to the snout, in all cases, however, the first adventure into the dreaded atmosphere seems to have been largely determined by the inexorable crowding of enemies and by the retreat further and further into the marginal situations where the oxygen supply was depleted. Finally, in the ruthless selection of the swamp margins or in the scramble for food on the tide flats, the land becomes home.
The land becomes home. So it has been with us. Speaking now of the land becoming home, to me, the most memorable chapter in this book is the chapter entitled How Flowers Saved the World. And I wonder, Bing, if you could interpret for us why that is such a significant event. When flowers all of a sudden become an instrument of salvation for the race.
If we go back into the late Jurassic periods, somewhat around 100 million years ago, and we look at what the land was like, as life emerged with the amphibians coming on and the first simple plants, the pine trees as we see them, the growth of plant life on this planet is, you have a beautiful pine cone, it falls from the tree, and where it lands and where its seeds may move a slight distance, that's where the next pine tree will come out. So we have, you might say, a world of brooding giants. The redwood forests, the pine forests covering the landscape of the earth, and the giant dinosaurs plodding the earth in total command. And somehow at the end of the Jurassic period, a new form of life emerges where instead of having to start life from where your seed pod falls, we have the development of what we call flowers, angiosperms, where the universe is carried, your life is carried with you, your food source is carried with you. And within this the first flowers that emerge are wind-borne. And as evolution, natural selection proceeds, or nature proceeds, we see cleverer and cleverer ways of dispersal. The growth of nectars, for instance, whereby insects can now carry your seed far and wide. The development of fruits, for instance, another very powerful, concentrated energy source. And what happens now is that life can experiment on the very fringes of what has existed up to that point, because now you can be wind-borne, it can be carried on the hooves, it can be carried on the legs of insects as they carry the pollen, and so we have this new form of dispersal onto the planet. And as beautiful as the pine forests are today, they do not carry this intense energy source. And it is this energy source which we will see as the fall of the age of the dinosaurs and now the beginning of the rise of the mammals. Whether or not there was a big bang at 70 million years ago, how that may or may not be the outcome. We see here at the end of the Jurassic and the beginning of the Cretaceous flowering process that begins, and it is going to permit the mammals, the first mammals, to succeed in a manner which up to this point they had only survived, you might say, in the margins and the boundaries of the reptilian world. And so for the first time we see a mechanism that opens up.
Why does that matter for these mammals, these animals that are making a living by eating each other? They're carnivores. Now, what becomes possible?
Well, for the first time, you have, take a look at the reptiles. We have the beginning of an ability to, the mammals, number one, have to have a heartbeat that utilizes warm, oxygenated blood that is able to perform during periods, for instance, that are extreme cold or at night. And you need a food source that provides an intense energy level. And as we look at the saber cats and things, animals that are predators, they still are dependent on herbivores. And the rise of the herbivores does not occur until the grasses and the flowers emerge. To fill the void left by the disappearance of the dinosaurs, and as size, it seems interesting that size, the niche that is filled by the disappearance of the dinosaurs, are filled by herbivores that are of increasing size. And herbivores feed on grasses and flowers.
What did that have to do with us?
Well, if we take a look at the earliest primates, the primates of which we are most probably descended from, had to have that ground source in which to be able to survive. And as the forests began to be encroached upon, the primate long-distant relative, which made that commitment to the ground, how was it going to survive? And it turns out that those early primates would feed on seeds,
the flowers
and fruits.
Flowers enabled the primates to develop
and to successfully adapt to ground living.
And saved history from being at the carnivore level. Now that goes on over and over again. We have to keep relearning how to get rid, or how to transcend, maybe not get rid, but how to transcend the carnivorous impulse. We have different kinds of instrumentalities now for achieving our purpose. The advance, the more we depend upon our technology to do what needs to be done, and the less we depend on the fullness of the body to develop the tool that is needed, prehensile tools, for example, the less we have to depend. developing a physical extension to do a job.